Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat. The next session is about to start. Signore e signori, per favore, prendete posto, la sessione sta per iniziare.
Okay, all right, the music is over, so let's get this started. Hello, my name is Chiara Lovotti, I'm an ISP Research Fellow, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you all at this panel titled Pivot to the MENA, the BRICS Bold Expansion Strategy. So the BRICS, everyone knows them, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. As you know, recently, between the last year and this year, the BRICS extended membership to several newcomers: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, the United Saudi Arabia, question mark, will it stay or will it go? Exactly. Our expert will tell us. And the UAE. So what does this enlargement mean? This is really the question that we will try to unpack in this afternoon session of ours. So from the perspective of BRICS countries, I would say the goal is quite clear: seeking new partners, seeking new friends, seeking new markets, new business options. In the case of Russia and China, there has been much debate on whether Moscow and Beijing also perceive the BRICS Plus, of course, the name of the extended cartel, as a largely anti-Western alliance. We will see what our expert think about that. From the perspective of the new members, so and today here we are focusing primarily on the Middle East and North Africa countries. From their perspective, I would say the core goal is pretty much the same, also seeking new partners. MENA countries also need new partnerships, and for both political and economic reasons. But it may also be that the BRICS Plus membership is particularly appealing for MENA countries because it offers them a platform to really be seated at the stage, at the table of global governance. Over the past few years, MENA countries have been very central in global affairs, but probably it may be that their increased importance has not been adequately reflected within the multilateral institutions that are tasked with the responsibility to uphold global stability and global prosperity, especially if compared to the relevance and the importance and the voice that has traditionally been given to Western powers in the same institutions. And probably it is this mismatch, this difference has pushed MENA countries to look beyond traditional allies and alliances, eventually probably also making the BRICS so attractive for them. So what do MENA countries think they can get from the BRICS? How likely is this group to achieve institutional reforms of global governance? And ultimately, but importantly, is this convergence of interests that we're witnessing now between the BRICS and the MENA countries, is it solid? Is it real enough to last on the long term? So as I said, I've been very, very happy to discuss these with a stellar lineup of speakers. So from my right, Aziz Al-Ghassan, who's a fellow of the CEPAD and also senior fellow of the Observer Research Foundation. right? Nikolai Khajanov, Research Associate Professor at the Gulf Studies Center of the Qatar University. Di Dongsheng is the Dean of the School of Global and Area Studies of the Renmin University of China. And finally, Amid Reza Azizi, last but not least, a visiting fellow at the SWP. So with no further ado, I would start actually with you, Amid Reza. I would follow complicated order, not by sitting. Very direct question. What do MENA countries hope to achieve from the BRICS membership?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this forum. Let me start by setting a framework of kind of analytical background of the discussion that can be discussed in detail further. Of course, different countries in the MENA region have different foreign policy priorities, and as a result, their approaches toward BRICS differ, especially in details. But I think the main driving force behind the interest on the side of the MENA countries to either partner with or join the BRICS is some sort of a perception of a change in international system. And especially when it comes to the region, the perception of post-American, not necessarily maybe non-American regional order. And in that sense, in that context, they are basically redefining their roles on the global stage. But that being said, I think we can identify at least three different approaches to BRICS, specifically speaking. On one side, we have Iran, which seems to be interpreting the change that I mentioned in the global stage as the return to bipolarity. Somehow, we have rising non-Western, or in the case of Iran, Eastern Bloc against the Western Bloc, and Iran has been trying to align itself with this emerging bloc. And in that context, we can see decisions like support for Russia in the war in Ukraine, joining BRICS, cooperating with SCO, et cetera, et cetera. So it goes beyond this or that administration, I think. For example, recently, Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, after the BRICS meeting, tweeted something like, the sun is rising from the east and setting in the west. So it's quite telling. It's a deep, kind of deepening, I would say, perception. The second camp, or the second approach, is that of countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, UAE. So they see also the same change, I think, but they are trying to, I would say, in the context of a more pragmatic approach, trying to balance their relationship, the traditional alliances that they have had with the West, with those with emerging powers, without necessarily abandoning those traditional partnerships. So a lot has been said about diversification of alliances or the concept of a multi-aligned Middle East. As far as I can see, it goes even beyond a multi-aligned foreign policy. We can speak of a post-aligned Middle East, because these countries are not seeking going toward different directions, asking for alliances. They are trying to increase their weight and present themselves as independent centers of gravity, so that global powers would come to them. So this is the substantial shift, I think, geopolitical shift that we've seen. And finally, when it comes to countries like Egypt and other countries that have been working somehow in different capacities with BRICS, I think it's about, again, the same perception, but trying to use this moment of multipolarity in order to get the maximum benefits from both sides, especially when it comes to economic opportunities, what BRICS has promised to fulfill, for example, currency investment, etc. So that's how I see it, actually.
Thank you, Amid Reza. Aziz, I will now come to you. We mentioned this. For over a year, Saudi Arabia has been on the fence on whether to join the BRICS or not. Will it stay or will it go? What should we expect?
Well, firstly, I just wanted to thank all the organizers. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you all for being here. So I think, a lot of people are, every time when Saudi Arabia and BRICS comes into the discussion, one of the first things they ask me is Saudi Arabia in BRICS or is it not in BRICS? What's going on here? We don't know. And I think it is indeed in a gray area. It is not part of BRICS yet. But this gray area, I think, just want to say a few words on this gray area that Saudi kind of tends to position itself in very well. Historically, it's always operated very well in this gray area. It's one of the, not sure, there we go. Okay, good. So not sure, you know, if it, I'm sorry, it operated very comfortably in the gray area. This was actually part of a survival mechanism. It always adapted to the uncertainties of the world. And, you know, I think as Dr. Aziza mentioned about, you know, this alignments and previous alignments, during that time in a bipolar world, you know, a lot of the times people think that the Saudi-American relationship or the Saudi-Western relations were very much intact and yes, they were strong, but there was a great deal of anxiety from the Saudi perspective. And so I think they realized that anybody, you know, diversification now is not only a strategy, but really a mechanism of generating new alternatives that could enable it to reach its very lofty ambitions. And I think anybody that follows Saudi Arabia now will see or hear of one of the core themes, Vision 2030. That's one of the core themes that one would hear, but in particularly is diversification. So you have here BRICS, and there's a relationship between BRICS and Saudi Arabia really has at its heart the process of diversification. Both, I think BRICS is seeking a more diversified global order, and Saudi Arabia sees also a great deal of credence in this diversification. So, and why? Because I think for Saudi, restructuring its economy is not a matter of preference. It's an existential question for Saudi Arabia. And I think not many people, you know, appreciate that enough, in my opinion. It's an existential question. And that's why I think BRICS and Saudi Arabia and you know, are very harmonious when it comes to this this joint principle of diversification and joint goal. Now, I just want to also say this. One of the reasons why it's not there yet is, you know, a hedging strategy. And I think this is something that they're also very good at. I think Saudi Arabia sees a great deal of credence and utility in generating options, because that's something that I think they're really looking forward to do. And but this is the thing, what kind of option is BRICS? BRICS for Saudi Arabia is considered to be, I'll raise my voice a little bit, that's fine. BRICS is not considered a substitute, but an alternative. And I think the Saudi lens is how Saudi sees BRICS or sees this evolving multipolarity. So you can't hear? Okay, I'll just hear it. I'll just hold it like this. How's that? Thank you very much. Okay, no problem. So I think, can you guys hear me now? All righty, good. My dad would be very happy if I never had a microphone. he would be like, don't tell him there's a microphone issue, please. Yeah. But anyways, I'll just say a few words here and I'll be quiet. I'll try to. The Saudi lens in this multipolarity, I think too many people like to embrace Saudi and saying Saudi Arabia is trying to be multipolar, embracing this. I don't think so. I think we have to be a bit more nuanced in how Saudi sees the Saudi lens of multipolarity. And in my opinion, I think Saudi sees the new world order and this emerging world order as an asymmetric multipolar world. In other words, that BRICS is an... How about now? Okay. I'll just say this. In a multipolar world. I wish BRICS could, we could have more BRICS. You see, the diversification of microphones as well is paying off. So I think what Saudi sees the world, this multipolar world, not in a symmetric multipolar world, but in an asymmetric multipolar world. It still sees the United States as its main preference. However, note that it's not a strategic necessity that it used to be, but the United States, for example, is a strategic desire, a strategic preference. And now Saudi understands that it has options, which gives it also room to negotiate more. So I think the relationship between BRICS and Saudi Arabia, and especially with a Saudi asymmetrical multipolar lens, renders a great deal of potential for the days ahead.
I think it works better if we share the mic. Okay, so now, Nikolai, I'll come to you now. So the BRICS expansion is clearly very much in Russia's interests, geostrategic, economic, political interests. It has been clear also with Russia's hosting of the summit about a month ago in Kazan. What did that summit achieve?
Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to be here and to share my thoughts. Though the question you're asking, again, it will require the proper answer. It will require 1001 night storylines, but I'll try to formulate it within like three points. First of all, definitely Moscow cannot afford to present this summit as a kind of an anti-Western event. From what we've already heard, these countries that either participating or has interest towards it, they definitely pursuing different goals, and any attempt to add an obvious anti-Western flavor to this organization will alienate them. Meanwhile, and that's the second point, Moscow definitely is exploiting BRICS and its expansion for its own needs, which are largely determined by the Russia's confrontation with the West and by the consequences of Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. From this point of view, Russia is playing a long game. In terms of the near gains, like the direct gains, we definitely see the substantial effect of the summit on the Russia's image, both inside of the country and outside of it. Moscow clearly showed to the international community that there is no global isolation. It definitely has certain support, and I don't like to use this phrase, but it's quite popular today within the global South, though what the global South is a good question. And it sure up to a certain extent the social base of support of the Putin's regime inside the country, showing that, look, we're not alone. Our economy is not doing well, but see, there are 35 countries that came to our summit. However, I would be much more cautious and much more interested in the long-term outcomes of Kazan summit, because Moscow clearly stated what it would like to get from this organization in the long run. It's basically the story of the creating quite a complex system that would allow Russia to avoid sanctions or to undermine any attempt to strengthen the sanctions pressure imposed on it. And what's more important, Russia is basically making a blueprint that can be followed by other countries. And that's the third and the last point, unfortunately, in time, that I would like to make, that Russia's success, and we must admit it, though there were no like direct and viable outcomes, but it was a success in bringing at least 35 countries the leaders of 35 countries in one place. It wouldn't be possible without those processes that are currently taking place within the international economy and within the international system of international relations. Namely, we see the world is trying to diversify its relations, hedge its relations. And we see that the world is genuinely scared by those sanctions war that are waged between Russia and the West. Drawing parallels between the experience it sees happening in Iran, in Russia, and bringing this experience on themselves and trying to think that maybe some of those mechanisms that are currently inbuilt by Moscow, by Tehran, you name it, they might be useful in the future for themselves. So which has definitely created a certain base for the progress of Russia in building up its own system of sanctions evasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikolai. Dongsheng, China has great stakes in the Middle East and North Africa region. How could the BRICS expansion promote these stakes, these interests of China?
Okay, thank you for having me here. Obviously, China is very keen to see the expansion of the BRICS to the MENA region because we have big stake here, especially from economic perspective, as China is the largest exporter of industrial products in the world, and also one more important provider of the FDI, foreign direct investment. You can imagine how many entrepreneurs in China is now thinking about moving part of their productivity out of China. And MENA region is one of the very attractive investing places. And more importantly, China is now the largest importer of the gas and oil from the region. So that's why China is very keen to see that. I will keep my answer brief and answer more importantly your other questions. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So I will now go to Amit Reza. In concrete terms, do you think that this enlargement will have significant effects on the MENA region, or is it mainly a symbolic change?
Of course, it depends on a lot of factors. I think, for example, the case of Saudi Arabia was already mentioned. So as an Iran expert, if I want to mention the Iranian approach, for example, to that, and to connect it to the broader regional dynamics, like, for example, the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, I see concrete benefits, at least as long as the perceptions of these leaders are concerned. So for Iran, actually, membership in BRICS Plus alongside regional neighbors is of some sort of a complementary impact, because especially since last year, since March 2023, when we saw the détente agreements between Iran and Saudi Arabia, there started to be a significant improvement of the relationship. And interestingly, despite the war in Gaza and despite the overall tension in the region, not only the course of rapprochement did not was not negatively impacted, but actually they doubled down on reaching out to each other. So in that sense, as far as I can see from the Iranian perspective, for example, they see a complementary element to that. And of course, as I mentioned, in the case of Iran, in the case of other countries like Egypt, etc., there's also concrete expectations when it comes to the economic potential of BRICS. Of course, this seems to be something longer term on one hand, and on the other hand, the priorities of different sides seem to be kind of rather different, because for Iran is in need of like investment and also ways to bypass the sanctions, and it looks to BRICS in that framework. But the potential for a BRICS currency or investment fund, for example, these are still under discussion. So regional rapprochement on one hand, and also economy on the other hand, these are, I think, concrete elements that different actors in the region are looking to or expecting to gain from cooperating with BRICS.
Thank you, Mirza. Aziz, there has been much talk about within the BRICS Plus about de-dollarization, the creation of new global financial institutions. What do you think is Saudi Arabia's perspective on that?
Thank you. I don't think Saudi has an interest in de-dollarization, because I think it's not in Saudi's interest, and I think understanding the Saudi logic, Saudi doesn't have economically speaking, it doesn't see any utility in trying to reduce any kind of spending power of someone. Instead, it just wants to diversify the amount of spending. And so when it changed the economic system or diversifies it, it sees itself, that's what it sees in its interest. And I think the Saudis here are very rationally motivated rather than ideologically motivated in this sense. And I think what they want to do is that they sense also into this diversification, they see themselves as also part of trying to be a hub. Okay. So trying to be a hub, a global hub. And I think it realizes that, okay, it's not just, it just doesn't want to be a global hub for anybody that uses the dollars or deals with dollars, but it really wants to be a universal hub. And that's part of its language. It's part of its language is universality. You know, we're open to everyone. And so I think, you know, Saudi is going to be, I sense, and I see there's the struggle over Saudi. Who wants to have these, you know, Saudi wants to be in, people are trying to grab Saudi into their own respective blocks. And I think Saudi senses itself that it's big enough to withstand that pressure. And it also has right now enough confidence. There is a certain there's an undoubted confidence that Saudi has that, well, you know, we are now one of the lucrative markets in the world. So rather than being dragged into a market, it's waiting for others to join it. So I think de-dollarization is not in its interest, but not doing anything. So it's going to be more open and universal.
Thank you, Aziz. Nikolai, always on this matter of de-dollarization, Russia has made a proposal in Kazan to give the process a boost. Do you think it can really deliver, also considering Trump's threat on countries that are pushing towards de-dollarization?
Well, definitely it's a part of those measures that I mentioned aimed at the building up the sanctions evasion schemes to ease the ability of the US and the Western world to implement sanctions and the economic pressure, including with the suggestions, for instance, by the Russians to build up the clearing center for the trade or the institutions to support the investments within the BRICS. Will we see the world without a dollar? Of course not. But at the same time, I would say that the share of non-dollar trade and exchange, it will be growing. And not for the sake of the Russians or the Russian initiatives. After the February 2022 and after the beginning of this global economic confrontation, the countries themselves, they started being care about also hedging their risks. They saw that being dependent on the dollar-euro system and financial relations is not always a good idea, and there is always should be a plan B. And it was clearly demonstrated by the Russian experience. And I'm not promoting here the Russian effectiveness to evade sanctions, don't take me wrong, from the other camp, I would say, who is saying that the current regime is under pressure. But at the same time, just one example, before February 2022, the main promoters of the idea of the de-dollarized world were the Rouge states, Libya, Venezuela, Iran. Well, Russia joined them. But now one of the most effective and most active countries in this world sometimes can be the partners of the West, of the US. So the UAE is actively promoting the idea to use their own dinar in the international trade relations. And it's not the way to pinch the West or has it to create troubles with the relations with the West, but rather to hedge their own risks and to give an answer to those changes that are happening in the global economy. Unfortunately, the securitization of the economic relations that happened after February 2022 is changing the world, and sometimes not in favor of those countries that were imposing the sanctions to punish the invader. But we need to accept the world is changing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikolai. Dongsheng, we mentioned before, China has great economic stakes in the Middle East and North Africa region, but lately, over the past few years at least, it has also shown an interest to engage more in political processes of the region, just to mention the brokering of the deal, for instance, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And after this year's Beijing declaration, do you think is China willing to further promote its role as an active mediator in the MENA conflicts? And do you think that this expansion of the BRICS towards MENA countries is a sign that China is willing to work more into that direction?
Traditionally, China's interest in the MENA region is basically, only in the economics field, but in the recent years, as you mentioned, in the past several years, China is more and more active in political aspect and the security aspect. For example, before the Beijing Declaration, back in December 2022, Chinese top leader Xi Jinping, he went to Saudi Arabia and held a 3-round summit. And not only a summit between Saudi and China, but also the summit with the other Arabic and Gulf leaders. And soon after that, and partly because of that successful summits, half year later, China mediated the peaceful talk between, as you mentioned, between Iran and Saudi, and which was quite a surprise to the whole world. And which unimaginably recently they even had a joint military exercise together. And that shows the tendency that China is taking more and more active role. And here I would like to point out that in the past, if you look back on the century history of that region, the Western powers rising century ago, the rising Western power, especially Anglo-Saxon power, has practiced divide the role principle in that region, which result in a lot of chaos and conflicts and hatreds. But China's attitude and China's approach toward that region is more uniting and enabling, which is very different, opposite from the Western attitude. So in the past several years, we have helped mediate the antagonistic powers like Iran and Saudi, but also the divided 16 different groups in Palestine to have a more united attitude toward outside threats. So that's a political aspect, but also economic aspect, we are also enabling them. The one case that I always bring up is that if you look back, like the year 2000, which is the year before China joined the WTO, if we compare the trade term of that region, which is how much oil you exchange for a typical industrial product like cell phone. Back in 2000, you need like 30 to 40 barrels of oil for an average cell phone. But today, you only need 3 to 4 barrels of oil for one smartphone, average smartphone. So I bring that political cases and economic cases together to show that China's attitude is more enabling and uniting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dongsheng. Thank you very much. One last round of questions, Hamid Reza, I will come to you. So in Iran, in the recent election of a reformist president has boosted hopes for Tehran's improved dialogue with the West. With the West, I mean primarily the United States, but I would also say European powers. Do you think that now Iran's BRICS membership will take its toll on its relations with the West?
I think looking at the current state of relationship between Iran and the EU, there's little we can expect in terms of negative impacts of BRICS specifically, in concrete terms, because on one hand, we already have kind of pre-existing cycle of distrust and tensions. And it's been ongoing for quite some time. The US withdrawal from the JCPOA, the failure of INSTEX, for example, to provide economic benefits for Iran, then Iran supporting Russia in its invasion of Ukraine with drones, potential missiles. So the relationship is now in a state that it has never been before in terms of the tensions. So in that sense, I don't think this specific issue of Iran's BRICS Plus membership can have a significant impact, but it is rather a sign of where we are, because this look to the East policy, so-called look to the East policy, has been established cornerstone of Iranian foreign policy for years. But what we have seen in the past few years has been some sort of institutionalization of look to the East, institutionalization in both terms or in both meanings, like looking at the institutions and also, state institutions as a whole pursuing this policy. So again, as I said, it goes beyond this or that administration. And in the best case scenario, even when the current administration, Pezeshkian and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, when they spoke about improvement, then, for example, Araghchi elaborated that Europe is not a priority. With the United States, it's about managing the tensions. And again, that was the look to the East that came to attention. So that's how I see it. It can, of course, in terms of symbolism, sort of intensify those negative views, and it should, I think, on the Western side, that Iran is increasingly siding with adversarial or at least rival powers, especially with Russia. But again, in concrete terms, as I said, I don't think that it's going to, this specific factor is going to be an independent factor in the relationship.
Thank you very much, Hamid Reza. Aziz, now back to you. A similar question, actually, to the one that I just asked to Hamid Reza. So Saudi Arabia's potential membership in the BRICS Plus would probably bring it closer to what is largely perceived, as we said before, as an anti-Western alliance. Do you think this is the reason why Riyadh is hesitating?
That's one, that could be one reason. That could be one reason. I think, again, we're talking about here an aspect of constant, of balancing. And I think something that Saudi has done very well in the Saudi foreign policy, and the Saudi ruling elite has balanced situations and balanced its interests very well. Personally, as a researcher of Saudi policy, of Saudi foreign policy, I've kind of looked at the main mechanism or the vehicle of this balancing, and language was a very useful go-to for the Saudi ruling elite historically to really balance its interests. And we're going to see this. We're going to see how Saudi depicts BRICS, its relationship with BRICS. So I've even heard sometimes in meetings where BRICS in an American audience or a Western audience, BRICS was basically saying, listen, you would want us to be in BRICS, because then if you have problems with anybody in BRICS, then you have a friend in BRICS that could help you address these issues. So here, I think the process of language is not to be underestimated, in my opinion. So that's one of the aspects, especially when we're going to have a president now that's in the US that's going to be coming here. So it'll be interesting to see this. But I just want to mention one point quickly about the role of China, and what I think has, what we could consider the role of China in brokering the Saudi Iranian deal as well, is a diversification of international actors in the region. And for me, the point that I want to communicate in particular is not just the role of the diversification of international actors, but the effect of it structurally on the region, which helped boost a particular regional agency. Now, a regional agency that still is precarious, that still need some help, but you could see that in this aspect of trying to really boost a regional agency, trying to say, listen, let us work together. We need to be talking together in the region. And I think this was facilitated and regional agency was boosted somewhat slightly. We could debate the extent of this boost because there was a diversification of international actors. And that's what I think China offered at that time.
Thank you very much, Aziz. Nikolai, now another question to you. Actually, Aziz introduced well the question that I was going to ask. You are condemned to be the Russian voice in the panel, but you are actually an expert on the Gulf region. So do you think that the BRICS expansion to Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, will have the potential to affect the equilibrium of power in the region? What should we expect, especially from as I said, the joining of the UAE and potential joining of Saudi Arabia?
Oh, thank you very much for finally addressing to my major specialization. People are deceived by my accent. We believe somehow that I'm a Russia expert. I'm not. Definitely the joining of the BRICS or the work with the BRICS in the format that Saudi Arabia has chosen, it can be in favor of the interests of the Gulf states, and specifically from the economic point of view. We were repeating Russia here is too often, but BRICS is actually not that much about Russia, but rather about the platform through which you can communicate and interact. And from this point of view, for the Gulf states, it's specifically interesting that this organization, this structure, allows you to talk to the main oil consumers. And given those processes of the fourth global energy transition that was accelerated after the beginning of the war in Ukraine, and the strategies of these states aimed at the transformation of their economies, they need to build up even tighter connections with India, with China. And if, for instance, when we're talking about India, we're talking about the large consumer markets. In case of China, it also represents a very interesting opportunity for these states in terms of the transformation of their own economies. It's not only about even trade of oil that helps to maximize the petrodollars and to reinvest them in the reform programs. It's not even about closing connections to China itself or Chinese money going to the GCC economies. It is about the fact that right now China is becoming one of the active and massive suppliers of technologies and equipment necessary for the development of the sustainable energy resources. And it's challenging Europe in this direction. And from this point of view, another window through which these states can talk to China, can interact, and maybe even build up stronger relations within those transport initiatives that are offered by Beijing and supported by other players. That's what is drawing them to this organization. That's what might be extremely useful for them in the future.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. Dongsheng, you have the responsibility to close the panel now with the $1 million question. So Donald Trump will soon be back to the White House, and its foreign trade and energy policies are likely to be disruptive. Will Trump's approach translate into more BRICS or less BRICS? What do you expect?
Yeah, so thank you. Donald Trump's coming back to power is a big issue for not only China, but also both MENA region and the whole Europe. And because I believe his policy and expectation on his policy is making huge differences right now. And from what we hear and from what he have already promised, I believe his second presidency will make the global tariff higher and the global inflation higher, and less global governance, less international cooperation, and hopefully less wars, because according to some of the news, he's very eager to achieve Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah, so I wish he could achieve that. And lower energy price, because to hedging against the higher inflation, he's going to pushing down the energy price for various ways, maybe some more pressure on the Middle East, but more carbon emissions. So that's what we're expecting right now. But to less or more BRICS expansion, I personally believe that's almost irrelevant because BRICS expansion and deeper integration has its own momentum, because it's the will and interest of the member states and more broadly, the whole global South. They want a platform, as mentioned before. They want a more fair and open, inclusive platform to present their own ideas and interests. So that's why I believe the expansion and the further integration of the BRICS will not be that much influenced by the domestic politics and foreign policy of the United States.
Thank you very much, Dongsheng. And we finished ahead of time, so I think the organizers will be happy. Thank you very much. Please join me in a round of applause to our speakers.